It was supposed to be a normal Tuesday. Mark returned home early, the sun barely touching the horizon. The hallway was quiet, too quiet. No laughter from the kids, no background music, just silence. He set his keys down and heard something faint. A muffled voice. Then, another. It came from the guest room, the one no one used. He moved closer, each step heavier than the last. As he opened the door slightly, his heart froze. There, wrapped in a tangled embrace, were his wife, Emily, and his brother-in-law, Dylan. Time slowed. His breath hitched. His world, once a sanctuary of trust, shattered. Emily gasped. Dylan stumbled backward. "Mark, she started, but he was already gone. Out the door. Into the night. The betrayal sank deep, like a dagger twisted slowly in his gut. Nothing would be the same again. Mark drove aimlessly. The road unspooled beneath him like his thoughts, long, chaotic, and without direction. Rain began to tap gently against the windshield, a soft counterpoint to the storm raging inside him. His grip on the steering wheel tightened. How long? Why Dylan? Questions spiraled with no answers in sight. Every memory of his marriage, holidays, birthdays, whispered promises, played like a cruel joke in his mind. He pulled over near a park, hands trembling. He rested his forehead on the steering wheel and screamed into the silence. No one heard. No one came. He wasn't just betrayed by a spouse. He was betrayed by someone he called family. The pain wasn't sharp. It was slow burning, like acid on skin, constant, unbearable, and everywhere. He sat alone at the park bench, his clothes damp, but he didn't care. Children's laughter once filled this place. He remembered pushing his daughter on the swing here, Emily snapping photos. That life felt like it belonged to someone else now. He checked his phone. No messages. No missed calls. Just silence. The world kept moving. A jogger passed by without a glance. A dog barked in the distance. He was invisible. The betrayal had isolated him, thrown him into a void. He wanted to scream at the sky, punch the earth, disappear. But he did none of that. He just sat, eyes hollow, heart numb, wondering how the people he loved most could be the ones to break him. Mark returned home late, the house still as a grave. Emily wasn't there. Neither was Dylan. The silence was thick, suffocating. He walked through the living room, past family portraits now warped by lies. He entered the bedroom they once shared. The bed was made, untouched. A folded note sat on the nightstand. He hesitated, then picked it up. It wasn't from her. It was from himself. A list he'd made weeks ago. Things to tell Emily. 1. I got the promotion. 2. Let's plan the cabin trip. 3. I love you. He crumpled the note. That man, that version of himself was gone. All that remained was a hollow echo of who he used to be. He couldn't sleep. The ticking clock felt like a countdown to something worse. Shadows danced on the walls as headlights passed by outside. He sat at the kitchen table, nursing a cold cup of coffee. His wedding ring sat beside it, like a symbol of something broken, useless. He picked it up, stared at it, and then slid it into his pocket, not ready to toss it, not ready to wear it. The silence was no longer peaceful. It was a roar in his ears. Everything hurt. His pride. His heart. His future. He didn't know what tomorrow held, but he knew tonight had marked the death of who he thought he was. A husband, a family man, a believer in love. Just 2 weeks earlier, life had felt full. Mark stood in the kitchen, flipping pancakes while Emily hummed to herself across the room. Their daughter Lily laughed as syrup dripped onto her pajamas. It had been chaotic and beautiful. Mark cherished mornings like this, unfiltered, messy, real. Dad, you're burning it, Lily shrieked. Mark chuckled and flipped the blackened pancake onto his own plate. Emily smiled, that smile that once made his world spin. They had plans. A cabin trip next month, Lily's birthday party, maybe even another child. Or so he thought. He believed love meant showing up, working hard, being loyal. He believed they were in it together. But belief is fragile, and hindsight is cruel. In that moment he was happy. And that's what haunts him the most. Mark had always admired Dylan. He was charismatic, funny, the life of every party. Emily's younger brother by 2 years, but confident like he owned the room. They bonded over football, shared beers during family barbecues, teased each other endlessly. Dylan was more than family, he was Mark's friend. At least, that's what he told himself. Looking back, there were moments. Glances exchanged between Dylan and Emily that Mark dismissed. Jokes that seemed too personal. But Mark trusted them. Trust was his flaw. He believed loyalty was sacred. Now, he couldn't look at old photos without feeling sick. Every smile, every shared joke, it all felt like part of the lie. The betrayal didn't just come from Emily. It came from someone he let in like a brother. He remembered the night they danced in the living room. No occasion, no music, just the hum of the fridge and the click of the ceiling fan. Emily had been washing dishes, and Mark had reached for her hand, pulling her close. She laughed, soft and surprised, leaning her head into his chest. "We're ridiculous," she said. "No, we're timeless," he replied. That memory used to make him smile. Now it felt like a cruel parody, like a scene in a movie that never matched the ending. He had been all in. That night he felt love so tangible he could taste it. He believed they were writing a story worth telling. Turns out, she was writing another chapter without him. Lily had drawn a picture last week, stick figures holding hands beneath a rainbow. "That's you, Mommy, me and Uncle Dylan," she had said proudly. Mark had chuckled then, completely unaware. The innocence in her voice haunted him now. He wondered what she knew, what she'd seen. Children sense more than we think. Would she remember the laughter, or the silence that followed? Would she ask why Daddy stopped tucking her in every night? Mark wanted to protect her from all of it. But how do you explain betrayal to a child who only sees love? His anger wasn't just for Emily or Dylan, it was for the way their choices would ripple through Lily's world, shaping how she loved, trusted, healed. Mark sat on the floor of Lily's room after she fell asleep, her soft breathing a rhythm against the silence. Stuffed animals lined the shelves, her favorite books still open beside the bed. This was his anchor. This was why he held back from screaming, from rage, from collapse. He tucked her blanket a little tighter and kissed her forehead. "I'll always be your dad," he whispered. Not even betrayal could take that. The storm in his heart calmed, if only briefly. The love he had for his daughter was untouched, untainted. He would rebuild, not for Emily, not for Dylan, but for Lily. That much he knew. He stood up, slower now, heavier than before. But his eyes had purpose. He was still her father. That was his truth. Mark hadn't spoken to Emily since that night. She called. He didn't answer. She texted. He didn't read. But then one afternoon, she showed up. No warning. Just the sound of the doorbell slicing through his silence. He opened the door slowly, and there she stood, eyes red, face pale, mouth trembling. "We need to talk," she said. He didn't move. "Why?" he asked, voice flat. "So you can lie to my face again?" Emily reached for his hand, but he stepped back. "It wasn't planned," she said. "It just happened." Mark's laugh was bitter. "You don't just happen into betrayal. You build it, one lie at a time," she cried. He stood still, cold, broken. The woman he once loved felt like a stranger now, one he couldn't bear to look at. Later that night, Mark walked into the garage, the one place untouched by lies. He sat on an old stool, surrounded by tools and dust. The silence was deafening. He picked up a hammer, then set it down. Picked up a photo, then smashed it. A wedding photo. It shattered on the cement, glass spraying like truth breaking free. He screamed, raw, guttural, a sound he didn't recognize. His pain had outgrown words. It had become movement, destruction, grief. He slid to the floor, hands over his face. He wasn't just mourning a relationship. He was mourning the man he used to be, the trusting husband, the hopeful father, the believer. Now he was someone else. Someone he didn't know. Someone the world had carved out of betrayal. Mark finally answered one of Dylan's calls. It was a short conversation, but one Mark would never forget. "I messed up," Dylan said. "I didn't mean to hurt you." Mark's silence was louder than rage. "You were my brother," he said at last. "You were supposed to protect her, not become the reason I lose her." Dylan stammered. "I didn't plan any of this. I was in a bad place, she was too." Mark's voice dropped. "You were in my house. You sat at my table. You played with my daughter." Dylan whispered, "I'm sorry." Mark hung up. There was nothing else to say. Some apologies come too late. Some wounds don't stop bleeding just because someone says they regret making them. At work, Mark couldn't concentrate. Spreadsheets blurred. Conversations passed without meaning. His boss called him in, concerned. "You've been distracted," she said gently. Mark nodded, eyes hollow. "Personal things," he muttered. She paused, then offered, "Take some time if you need to." But time wouldn't fix this. Nothing would. He walked out of the office, down the long hallway, and stared out the window at the city below. People moved like clockwork, rushing, talking, laughing. As if nothing had changed. As if the world hadn't fallen apart. That's what betrayal does. It isolates you in plain sight. Everyone else keeps moving, and you're the only one who remembers the explosion. Mark returned to therapy. He had gone once, years ago, after his mother died. This time was different. This time he didn't know where to begin. The therapist waited patiently. Mark stared at the floor. "I don't even know who I am anymore," he said. "I gave everything. I was faithful. I was present. I believe." The therapist nodded. "And now?" Mark exhaled slowly. "Now I feel like a fool." The words trembled in the air. "You were betrayed," she said. "That doesn't make you weak. It makes you human." Mark wiped his eyes, unsure when the tears had started. For the first time he let himself feel it all, not just anger but grief. And buried underneath it, somewhere, the beginning of strength. Mark received a message from Emily's sister Rachel, brief, urgent. "You need to know the truth. Can we meet?" They hadn't spoken much before, but something in her tone felt heavy. They met at a quiet cafe, the air tense with unsaid things. Rachel leaned in, her voice low. "They didn't just cheat on you," she said. "It wasn't some drunken mistake." Mark's jaw clenched. Rachel continued, "It's been going on for months. Dylan told me he was in love with her." Mark stared at her, numb. "She told me she wasn't happy. Said you were too predictable, too stable." The words hit like a slow poison. It hadn't just happened. It had been planned, cultivated. He had been left in the dark, not by accident but by design. The betrayal was deeper than he imagined. That night, Mark rummaged through the drawers Emily hadn't emptied. He wasn't sure what he was looking for. Proof? Closure? But what he found turned his stomach. A hotel receipt. 2 toothbrushes. A bottle of cologne he didn't use. All stuffed in a pouch beneath winter scarves. Carefully hidden. Deliberately placed. His hands shook as he examined each item like crime scene evidence. The cologne reeked of Dylan. He remembered joking about it at a family gathering once. Now, it made him nauseous. Everything was right there, in his home, under his roof. Every memory layered with lies. It wasn't only the affair that hurt. It was the intimacy they had shared in his world. His safe space had been contaminated. It was worse than infidelity. It was invasion. The next morning, Mark confronted Emily. She stood in the doorway of her sister's place, arms crossed, guilt lining her features. How long? He asked. She didn't speak. Months, he pushed. She nodded slowly. And you still let me kiss you goodnight? His voice cracked. Emily's eyes welled. I didn't want to hurt you. Mark's laugh was hollow. You didn't want to hurt me? You brought him into my house. Emily whispered, I didn't plan to fall for him. Mark stepped back. You didn't fall. You jumped. There it was. The full truth. No more half-buried secrets. She had made a choice. And in doing so she'd taken everything Mark thought was sacred and torn it apart piece by piece. Mark found himself in his parents' attic later that day, searching through old boxes like they held some forgotten wisdom. He pulled out photo albums, dusty journals, pieces of his childhood, untouched by betrayal. One picture caught his eye. Him and Emily at their wedding, both smiling like nothing could touch them. His parents had warned him once, subtly. She seems distant sometimes, his father had said. Are you sure she's all in? Mark had brushed it off. Love had made him deaf. Now he could hear everything clearly. Every warning. Every gut feeling he ignored. Sometimes the truth doesn't just arrive, it returns. And when it does, it hurts even more, because you realize it was there the whole time. That evening, Mark stood in front of the mirror and didn't recognize himself. Eyes sunken, jaw clenched, his reflection, a stranger. He gripped the sink and stared harder. Not at the pain, but at the man beneath it. You're not broken, he whispered. You were betrayed. He kept saying it, like a mantra, like a prayer. And slowly, it settled in. This wasn't his fault. Love had made him loyal. But loyalty shouldn't lead to ruin. He washed his face and stood taller. The betrayal had nearly destroyed him, but it wouldn't define him. Tomorrow, he would call a lawyer. He would protect Lily. He would protect himself. The truth had wrecked his life. But it had also set him free. Mark met with the divorce attorney on a gray Thursday morning. The room smelled like coffee and old books. The lawyer was calm, clinical, but Mark's voice trembled. I never thought I'd be here, he said. Nobody does, the lawyer replied. Papers were spread across the desk, custody terms, asset splits, timelines. As Mark signed the first document, his hands shook. It wasn't just a signature. It was the final nail in a life he once thought permanent. She cheated, he added, more to himself than anyone. The lawyer paused, then nodded. This isn't about failure. This is about survival. Mark swallowed hard. Survival. That word echoed in his head. He didn't feel strong yet, but with each signature he was reclaiming control. One line at a time. That night, Emily came to pick up Lily for the weekend. It was the first exchange since the papers were filed. Mark packed Lily's small suitcase carefully. Her favorite stuffed bear, her bedtime book. When the doorbell rang, he opened it to see Emily's eyes darting past him to their daughter. She's ready, Mark said, voice flat. Lily ran into her mother's arms. Bye, Daddy, she chirped. Mark bent down, kissed her cheek, and forced a smile. Emily lingered. I didn't want it to end like this, she said. Mark looked at her, truly looked, for the first time in weeks. You ended it the moment you chose him. No shouting. No drama. Just truth. Emily looked away. And just like that, they were no longer partners. Just parents. Mark stood in his daughter's empty room. The silence deafening. Her drawing still taped to the wall, her favorite dress draped over a chair. He picked up a framed photo from the dresser. Him, Emily, and Lily at the beach. He stared at it, at the frozen smiles. He thought about throwing it. Smashing it. But instead, he placed it gently, face down. Some memories are better left unseen. He sat on the edge of the bed and cried. Not out of weakness, but out of release. He had carried so much, anger, betrayal, confusion. But here alone, he could finally let it bleed out. It wasn't the photo, or the room, or even the marriage. It was the life he built in good faith, crumbling around him. The next morning, Mark walked into Dylan's gym, a place he'd visited before, back when they were still brothers. Dylan was behind the counter, surprised to see him. "Mark," he started. But Mark held up a hand. "I'm not here to fight, I'm here to say what I need." Dylan stood frozen. Mark continued, "You didn't just betray me, you took something sacred and stomped on it." Dylan's face tightened. "I never wanted to hurt you." Mark leaned in. "You didn't just hurt me, you gutted everything I believed in." A pause. Then Mark stepped back. "I'm walking away, not for you, for me." And with that, he turned and left. No fists. No yelling. Just closure, the most powerful revenge of all. That night, Mark sat on the balcony, city lights stretching beneath him like a map of second chances. The wind was cool, his coffee warm. For the first time in weeks, he breathed without breaking. He didn't have all the answers. He didn't have a roadmap. But he had truth. He had Lily. And he had himself. The silence no longer screamed. It comforted. He pulled out his journal, the one he hadn't touched since before the betrayal, and wrote, "I am still standing." He stared at the words. They weren't profound, but they were real. His world had cracked open. But in the spaces between, something new was growing. Not revenge. Not bitterness. Just the quiet strength of someone rebuilding. Mark took Lily to the zoo that Saturday. It was their first full day together since the separation was finalized. She held his hand tightly, her excitement infectious. "Can we see the lions first?" she asked, eyes wide. "Absolutely," he smiled. As they wandered through exhibits and shared ice cream, Mark felt something shift. Not the absence of pain, but the presence of joy. Real, raw, and momentary. Lily didn't ask about her mother. She didn't talk about Uncle Dylan. She just laughed. And in that laugh, Mark heard hope. For the first time in a long while, he wasn't dwelling in the past. He was present. Fully. The ache was still there, but so was life. That day didn't erase the betrayal, but it reminded him of what mattered most. Back home, Mark stood in front of a blank wall. The old photos were gone, removed after the betrayal. But the wall didn't feel empty. It felt ready. He pinned up Lily's newest drawing. A house with two people under a tree labeled, Mom and Dad. No third figure. Just them. His eyes welled. Children have a way of simplifying the truth. It wasn't about revenge. It was about rebuilding. On truth, not illusion. He grabbed more magnets and posted her artwork proudly. This wall wouldn't display lies anymore. It would show love. Real love. Lily ran into the room, grinning. "Do you like it?" she asked. Mark nodded, kneeling beside her. "It's perfect." Because it was. Not polished. Not complete. But honest. And that made it beautiful. Mark started running again. Early mornings before the city stirred. Each step against pavement became a form of therapy. Rhythmic, focused, cleansing. His thoughts no longer spiraled with every stride. Instead, he breathed deeper. Felt stronger. He didn't run away from pain anymore. He ran with it, beside it, past it. Neighbors waved. Dogs barked. Life went on. He'd lost things. People. Beliefs. But not everything. He still had control over this moment, this body, this breath. On his third lap around the block, he slowed to a walk, sweat clinging to his skin like proof of effort. And for the first time, he smiled without forcing it. It was small, but it was real. Sometimes healing doesn't roar. Sometimes it jogs. Emily sent one last message. "I'm sorry. I hope one day you'll forgive me." Mark stared at it for a long time. He didn't respond. Not because he hated her, but because he had nothing left to give her. Forgiveness wasn't a gift she could demand. It was a journey he had to walk on his own. Maybe someday he would reach it. Maybe not. And that was okay. Meh. Closure didn't always come with answers. Sometimes it was the choice to stop asking. He deleted the message. It was a quiet act, but powerful. The past would always be there, but he no longer had to carry it in his pocket. He stood, walked to the window, and let the silence stretch. This time it felt peaceful. Mark drove to the lake where he and Emily had once planned to retire. Alone this time. He stepped out of the car and walked down to the water's edge. The sun was setting, painting the sky in bruised purples and deep golds. He skipped a stone across the surface, once, twice, then gone. "Goodbye," he whispered, not to her, but to the version of himself that needed her. He closed his eyes and breathed in the stillness. The wind carried no answers. Just calm. He wasn't healed. He wasn't whole. But he was healing. And that was enough. As he turned to leave, the final light touched his face. Not a spotlight. A blessing. Sometimes surviving is the bravest thing you can do. Mark stood in the mirror one last time before heading out. A suit hung clean against his frame, not for a wedding or funeral, but for a job interview. A new opportunity. A new city. His eyes scanned his own reflection, no longer searching for the man who had been broken, but the man he had become. Scars were there, sure. You could see them in the set of his jaw, the way his eyes held stillness. But so was strength. Quiet, unyielding. Lily peeked from behind the door wearing her backpack. "Are you nervous, Daddy?" Mark smiled. "A little." She held out her hand. "Then I'll be brave for both of us." He took it. There was his anchor. Not the past. Not the pain. But the future, holding his hand, steadying his step. The interview room was sleek and modern, the kind of place he never imagined himself thriving in a year ago. But here he was. He spoke with clarity, confidence. No longer trying to prove himself, just show who he was. "Why the career change?" the interviewer asked. Mark paused, thoughtful. "Life shifted. I had to learn how to rebuild. Turns out I'm pretty good at it." A chuckle. A nod. And something else. A recognition in their eyes. He wasn't the same man who once placed his identity in being a husband. He was more. He had endured. And not only had he survived, he had grown. The interview ended with a handshake. As he walked out, he exhaled deeply. No matter the outcome, he had shown up. And that was enough. That evening, Mark and Lily made spaghetti in the small kitchen of their new apartment. It was cramped and cluttered, but filled with laughter. She dropped a meatball. He pretended it was a meteor. They both erupted in giggles. "We're your team, right?" she asked, cheeks covered in sauce. "Always," Mark said, lifting her onto the counter. This wasn't the life he'd planned, but it was one he was proud to live. No secrets. No shadows. Just love. Messy, loud, and real. As the pasta boiled and the radio played softly, Mark felt something rare. Contentment. Not every story needs a grand finish. Sometimes it's the quiet moments, stirring sauce, wiping tiny fingers, that prove you've made it through the storm. After dinner, Mark sat on the balcony with a notebook open across his lap. Betrayal. The stars were starting to blink awake. He wrote slowly, deliberately. Not about Emily. Not about Dylan. But about himself. "Today, I saw myself clearly. Not as the man who was betrayed, but as the man who endured." He paused. Listened to Lily, brushing her teeth in the other room. "I am not what was done to me. I am what I chose to become after." The pen stopped. He looked at the last line, etched in ink and truth. Then he closed the notebook and leaned back into the chair, letting the quiet night hold him. In the distance, a dog barked. Somewhere, laughter. Life continued. But now, so did he. As Mark tucked Lily into bed, she looked up at him and whispered, "You're my hero, Daddy." His throat tightened. "You're mine," he whispered back. She rolled onto her side, clutching her bare, eyes closing peacefully. He turned off the light and stood in the doorway, watching her breathe. The past would never disappear, but it didn't control him anymore. It was no longer a chain, it was just a chapter. The final line wasn't anger. It wasn't pain. It was this: love, quiet and pure, asleep in a twin bed beneath a nightlight. Mark closed the door gently. Not to shut something out, but to protect what was within. He walked down the hall, not broken, not waiting, but walking forward. That was his final act.